The single greatest threat to your bank account isn't inflation or a looming market crash. It's something so boring, so utterly invisible, that you probably interacted with it 3 times before breakfast without even noticing. It is the complete and total lack of friction in how you spend your money today. You might think your financial struggles come down to a lack of willpower, but your ability to save money was hijacked long before you even woke up this morning. Stay with me because what I'm about to tell you will completely change how you see your daily habits. Every single day, you step into a digital world engineered by some of the smartest people on Earth. Their entire job is to remove the biological alarm bells that used to keep human beings safe. You are walking into a casino disguised as a convenience store. We live in an era where buying a new television takes less physical effort than scratching your nose. You double tap your phone screen, a small chime plays, and money vanishes from an account you can't even physically touch. For thousands of years, transferring resources required physical travel and significant time. Today, it requires nothing but a thumbprint. You're not broken, you're not bad with money. Your brain is just operating on a piece of hardware that is a million years out of date. We are talking about a biological machine built for Pleistocene scarcity, suddenly dropped into a digital landscape of infinite abundance. Your ancient brain literally doesn't know how to process a world where resources can vanish in a second. Think about the evolutionary purpose of pain. Physical pain evolved to tell you when something is damaging your body. It screams at you to pull your hand away from a hot stove. Believe it or not, human beings evolved a very similar psychological mechanism for losing resources. Losing something you own is supposed to trigger an intense emotional response. That pain was a survival mechanism. If an early human lost their winter food supply, they didn't just get sad, they died. So our brains developed a hypersensitive alarm system to protect what is ours. When you used to hand over a crisp $100 bill to a cashier, that alarm system fired off. You could feel the physical loss of the paper. But the modern financial system discovered a terrifying loophole. They figured out how to bypass your brain's alarm system entirely. By removing the physical cash, they removed the neurological pain of paying. You don't feel the loss anymore. You only feel the dopamine hit of the shiny new thing arriving on your doorstep. You know how every financial influencer tells you to just have more discipline and track every penny? Yeah, about that. They are treating a structural problem as if it's a personal, moral failing. They are telling you to fight a team of thousands of engineers with nothing but a spreadsheet and a good attitude. Relying on willpower in a frictionless economy is like trying to hold your breath underwater. Eventually, your biology takes over. Every time you resist a targeted ad or ignore a flash sale, you are burning through a finite supply of mental energy. It's a concept known as willpower depletion, and the modern economy relies on you running out of gas. The system is designed to wear you down until you finally cave, usually right around 8 at night when you're exhausted. That is when the one-click purchase button looks like a lifesaver instead of a trap. We need to stop feeling guilty for falling into a pit that was dug specifically for us. It is time to stop playing defense with willpower and start playing offense with architecture. We need to start by looking at the exact biological hardware you are working with. For roughly 200,000 years, the human brain evolved in an environment of absolute scarcity. Every calorie mattered. Every piece of shelter was temporary, and hoarding resources was the only mathematical guarantee of surviving the winter. Your ancestors did not have the luxury of casual spending or impulse accumulation because everything cost massive amounts of physical energy. Fast forward to the present day, and that exact same biological hardware is sitting inside your skull. But the environment has mutated into something entirely unrecognizable to your nervous system. You are navigating a digital landscape of infinite abundance, where the friction between wanting something and owning something has been artificially erased. The mismatch between your ancient brain and this modern economic engine is the root cause of almost every financial mistake you make. To understand how this trap works, we have to talk about a concept in behavioral economics known as friction. In the physical world, friction is the resistance that one surface or object encounters when moving over another. In finance, friction is the psychological and physical resistance between you and your money. For the entirety of human history, spending resources came with built-in heavy friction. You had to walk to a market. You had to physically count out coins or barter goods. You had to look another human being in the eye and hand over a tangible representation of your labor. That friction gave your brain the necessary time to calculate the trade-off, allowing your rational mind to step in and ask if the transaction was actually worth it. Research from Stanford's Graduate School of Business has mapped exactly what happens to our brains when that friction is removed. When researchers put subjects inside brain scanners and simulated the act of buying items with physical cash, they saw something fascinating. The region of the brain associated with physical pain literally lit up on the scans. Human beings experience a neurological pain response when they hand over physical money. But when those same researchers had the subjects make purchases using credit cards or digital equivalents, that pain center went completely dark. The brain simply did not register the transaction as a loss of resources. The numbers on a screen did not trigger the ancient survival mechanism. The friction was gone, and with it went the biological alarm system that was supposed to keep you safe. Modern corporations understand this neurological loophole better than anyone else. They employ armies of behavioral psychologists to design checkout experiences that are as smooth and thoughtless as possible. When you use one-click ordering, autofill passwords, and face identification to buy something, you are not just saving time. You are being scientifically guided past your own biological defense mechanisms. This brings us to a state of constant cognitive dissonance. You logically know you should be saving money, and you genuinely want to build wealth. But your moment-to-moment actions contradict those goals because the dopamine hit of a frictionless purchase is so accessible. You end up rationalizing the spending after the fact just to resolve that uncomfortable mental tension. Here's what nobody tells you about this invisible war. You're not broken. You're not bad with money. Your brain is just doing exactly what it was programmed to do in an environment it was never meant to exist in. You are operating perfectly normally within a completely abnormal system engineered to drain your accounts. The moment you realize that your willpower is irrelevant, everything changes. You can finally stop beating yourself up for failing to resist a system designed by billionaires to exploit your Paleolithic biology. Understanding this evolutionary mismatch is the key to escaping the cycle, and it is the exact reason why we have to start fighting back, not with discipline, but with deliberate design. For almost the entirety of human civilization, money was something you could actually feel. It was heavy, it was forged from metal, and later it was printed on thick paper that took up physical space in your pocket. That physical weight wasn't just a matter of convenience or production. It served a vital, biological purpose for the people using it. When our ancestors traded a heavy pouch of silver for a winter supply of grain, their brains fundamentally understood that a massive transfer of life-saving resources had just occurred. The physical act of handing something over triggered a cascade of neurological signals. Your brain recognized the subtraction of mass, the emptying of your pockets, and the visual evidence that you now possessed less than you did a moment ago. This is what behavioral economists call the pain of paying, and it used to be a built-in feature of every single transaction you made. The friction was physical, and that physical friction kept human beings remarkably safe from overspending. But over the last few decades, a radical shift occurred, and it happened so quickly that human evolution never stood a chance of catching up. Money became completely invisible. Behavioral economists at the University of Chicago have studied this exact transition extensively, looking at what happens to human behavior when currency loses its physical form. What they found explains why you feel so disconnected from the numbers sitting in your bank account today. When you swipe a piece of plastic or double-tap the side of your smartphone, the physical mechanics of the transaction are exactly the same regardless of what you are buying. You use the exact same micromuscle movements to purchase a $3 cup of coffee as you do to book a $3,000 vacation. There is absolutely zero difference in physical effort. Your ancient brain is desperately looking for a physical cue to trigger the pain response, but that cue never arrives. Because there is no physical loss to observe, the biological alarm bell stays completely silent. You don't feel the pain of paying anymore. The friction has been surgically removed from the process. And because your biological alarm system has been bypassed, the entire burden of stopping a bad financial decision falls squarely on your rational, logical brain. This is the exact trap that the modern economy relies on. Your rational brain is incredible at doing math and setting long-term goals, but it operates on a very limited battery pack. Every single time you have to logically convince yourself not to buy something you see on your phone, you burn a little bit of that battery. Every targeted ad you ignore, every promotional email you delete, and every impulse you suppress drains your cognitive energy. This constant drain leads directly to a state known as willpower depletion. You might start your day with a full battery, easily saying no to the expensive breakfast sandwich and skipping the online sale during your lunch break. But your willpower is not an infinite resource. It is a biological fuel that runs out as the day goes on, and the corporations tracking your data know exactly when your tank hits empty. By the time you are laying on the couch at night, mindlessly scrolling through your feed, your rational brain is completely exhausted. The defenses are down. And because the digital checkout process has absolutely zero physical friction, there is nothing left to stop you from making the purchase. You click the button, the dopamine hits, and the invisible money vanishes before your logical brain can even process what just happened. You cannot fight this invisible war by simply promising to try harder tomorrow. Trying to budget by relying purely on discipline is a losing game. If we want to stop bleeding cash to frictionless systems, we have to artificially rebuild the pain of paying. We have to put the friction back into our financial lives on purpose, using systems instead of willpower. You do this by completely detaching your daily spending power from your main reservoir of wealth. You never attach your primary checking account or your high-limit credit cards to your phone or your internet browsers. Instead, you create a system where transferring money to your dedicated spending card requires a mandatory waiting period. If you want to buy something online, you force yourself to log into a separate portal, transfer the funds, and wait 24 to 48 hours for the money to clear. That artificial delay is the system fix. It does not require any willpower to execute once it is set up. You are simply reintroducing the friction that the digital economy tried to steal from you. By forcing a waiting period, you give your exhausted rational brain the time it needs to recharge, wake up, and recognize that a transaction is actually taking place. Money management isn't about restriction. It is about understanding that your brain needs help processing invisible losses. When you build heavy, deliberate friction into your digital spending, you stop fighting your biology and start protecting it. Let's talk about one of the most dangerous illusions in the modern economy. It's the reason why you'll ruthlessly negotiate a $100 discount on a used car, but you'll blindly let a company siphon $100 a month out of your checking account for a service you haven't used in 2 years. We treat different types of spending as if they exist in completely separate universes. You probably have a threshold for physical purchases. If you walk into a store and see a pair of shoes for $200, you pause, you hold them in your hands. You calculate how many hours you've had to work to earn that $200. But when a streaming service, an app subscription, or a digital gym membership charges you $15 a month, your brain completely ignores it. You tell yourself it's just $15. It's basically the cost of a sandwich. You brush it off, completely failing to recognize that you've just signed up to pay $180 a year indefinitely for something you might use twice. A landmark study from MIT looked specifically at how consumers process recurring digital charges compared to single physical purchases. The researchers discovered something terrifying about human behavior. When a cost is broken down into a small, recurring monthly fee, the human brain stops processing it as a loss. The MIT study showed that consumers will wildly overestimate their usage of a subscription service when they sign up, and then drastically underestimate how much they're actually paying for it a year later. The subscription model doesn't just lower the barrier to entry, it creates a psychological blind spot where the money leaving your account literally ceases to exist in your conscious mind. This happens because of a cognitive bias known as mental accounting. Mental accounting is how your brain tries to organize and categorize money to make sense of the world. But your brain is deeply flawed in this area. It treats $10 in one category very differently than $10 in another category, even though the math is exactly the same. In your mind, physical cash is real money. A large one-time purchase is real money. But a recurring digital charge is categorized as background noise, It gets filed away into a mental folder labeled as fixed costs, right next to your rent and your utility bills. Once a subscription gets filed into that fixed cost folder, your brain stops evaluating it. You no longer ask yourself if the service is worth the money because the transaction happens automatically, behind the scenes while you're sleeping. The corporations know this. They know that if they can just get you to agree to a small monthly fee, your mental accounting bias will guarantee they get paid for years. You can't rely on your memory or your willpower to cancel these services. Your brain has already hidden them from you. If you want to fix this leak, you've got to break the illusion of mental accounting by forcing a physical confrontation with your digital subscriptions. The system fix is something that requires maximum friction. Once a year, you don't just review your bank statements to look for leaks. You physically call your bank and report your primary debit and credit cards as lost. You ask them to issue you entirely new cards with brand new numbers. I know this sounds extreme. I know it sounds like a massive inconvenience, but that inconvenience is exactly the point. By changing your card numbers, you violently sever every single automated connection you've allowed to form. You force every single company to come knocking on your digital door, asking for your new payment information. When they do, you're finally forced to make an active, conscious decision about whether or not that service is actually adding value to your life. You drag the money out of the background noise and put it right back on the physical table. You beat mental accounting by making the invisible visible again, using architectural friction instead of discipline. Let us talk about what happens when the sun goes down. You finish a long day of work, you eat dinner, and you finally collapse onto your couch. You pull out your phone to scroll through your feed, thinking you are just relaxing and blowing off some steam. But what you are actually doing is stepping onto a highly optimized digital battlefield at the exact moment you are most vulnerable. Every morning, you wake up with a finite amount of cognitive energy. From the moment your alarm goes off, you are making choices. You choose what to wear, you navigate traffic, you manage emails, you solve problems at your job, and you figure out what to feed your family. Every single one of these choices, no matter how small, burns a measurable amount of glucose in your brain. By the time evening rolls around, the part of your brain responsible for logic and impulse control is running on empty. In behavioral economics, this biological reality is called decision fatigue. Decision fatigue is the deteriorating quality of decisions made by an individual after a long session of decision-making. Your brain simply gets too tired to weigh the long-term consequences of your actions. Researchers at Columbia University have studied this phenomenon extensively, looking at how the human brain handles repeated choices over a long period. They discovered that when decision fatigue sets in, the brain actively looks for shortcuts to save energy. It stops analyzing information and defaults to one of two extremes. It either completely shuts down and does nothing, or it acts recklessly and impulsively just to get the decision over with. Modern tech companies do not just know about this biological vulnerability, they have built their entire business models around it. This is algorithmic warfare. The apps on your phone track your usage patterns so closely that they know exactly when your cognitive defenses are down. They measure how fast you scroll, how long you linger on an image, and what time of day your willpower depletion is at its absolute worst. Have you ever noticed that the most aggressive targeted ads, the flash sales, and the limited time offers seem to flood your feed right around 8 or 9 at night? That is not a coincidence. That is a precision strike. They are intentionally attacking the castle when they know all the guards are asleep. They are waiting for your rational brain to shut off so they can speak directly to your impulse-driven emotional brain. When you buy that expensive piece of tech or that premium clothing item at 10 o'clock at night, you wake up the next morning feeling a wave of guilt. You look at the email receipt and you curse your own lack of discipline. You tell yourself that you need to be stronger, but you are blaming yourself for losing a rigged game. You were trying to outthink a billion-dollar supercomputer while your brain was literally out of fuel. That is not a failure of character, that is a biological inevitability. You cannot fight decision fatigue with willpower because willpower is the exact resource that you have run out of. If you try to resist the nighttime algorithms with raw discipline, you will lose every single time. To survive this algorithmic warfare, you must create a system that protects you from yourself when you are tired. You have to remove the burden of choice entirely. The most effective way to do this is by implementing an automated, non-negotiable system fix known as the 24-hour cart rule. It requires zero willpower to maintain once you put it into motion. The rule is incredibly simple. You are allowed to shop for anything you want at any time of day or night. You can browse the sales, you can pick out the items, and you can put them directly into your digital shopping cart. But you are absolutely forbidden from clicking the final checkout button until the sun comes up the next day. You let the items sit in the cart overnight. What this does is entirely sever the shopping experience from the purchasing experience. By forcing a sleep cycle between the impulse and the transaction, you allow your brain to rest. You give your cognitive battery the time it needs to recharge and come back online. When you wake up the next morning, your prefrontal cortex is fully operational again. You open the cart with a fresh supply of decision-making energy, and 90% of the time, the spell is completely broken. The item that felt like an absolute necessity the night before suddenly looks like a total waste of money. You delete it, you close the app, and you save your money without burning a single ounce of willpower. Let us look closely at another psychological trap hiding in plain sight on every digital storefront in the world. When you scroll through an endless feed of products, you are inevitably going to encounter a massive banner announcing a flash sale, a clearance event, or an exclusive discount just for you. We all love the feeling of getting a good deal, and that feeling is exactly what these platforms use to bypass your rational defenses. The trap usually plays out like this. You open an app with absolutely no intention of buying anything. But right at the top of the screen, you see a premium item marked down by 60% for the next 2 hours only. Before you even realize what is happening, your brain releases a massive wave of dopamine. You suddenly feel like a savvy investor who has just discovered a market inefficiency, when in reality, you are just someone about to lose money. This is where the digital environment weaponizes your survival instincts yet again. For our ancestors wandering the plains, finding a rare cache of high-calorie food was a massive victory. Spotting a bush completely loaded with ripe berries triggered intense reward pathways in the brain because it meant survival. Today, finding a digital discount triggers those exact same ancient neurological circuits. But modern digital sales are almost entirely fabricated. The corporations selling you these goods understand exactly how to manipulate your perception of value using a psychological mechanism known as anchoring bias. Anchoring bias is a cognitive flaw where the human brain heavily relies on the first piece of information it receives when making a decision. If you see a winter coat with a red line drawn through a price tag of $300 and the new price sitting underneath it is $100, your brain does not actually evaluate the coat. It evaluates the gap between the two numbers. You stop looking at the material, you stop thinking about the climate you live in, and you focus entirely on the $200 difference. Researchers studying consumer psychology, including foundational work from behavioral economists at Duke University, have shown exactly how powerful this anchor really is. When subjects are exposed to a high initial number, their rational ability to evaluate the true utility of an item collapses almost entirely. They stop asking if the physical object will improve their life, and they start focusing exclusively on the perceived mathematical victory of the transaction. The modern digital economy takes this anchoring bias and pours gasoline on it by injecting artificial urgency. They add digital countdown timers ticking away the seconds, banners that say only 3 items are left in stock, and notifications showing that 5 other people are looking at the same item. This creates a synthetic environment of absolute scarcity that sends your ancient brain into a full-blown panic. Your nervous system literally screams at you that the resources are running out and you are about to be left behind. In that moment, you are no longer making a rational purchasing decision based on your financial goals. You are reacting to a biological emergency. You click the buy button not because you actually need the item, but because you desperately need to relieve the anxiety of missing out. The inevitable result is a house full of things you bought exclusively because they were on sale. You rationalize the overflowing closets and the empty bank accounts with the completely false idea that you were saving money. But spending $100 on a $300 item is not saving $200. It is just spending $100 that you did not plan to spend. Here is the hard truth about anchoring bias. You cannot willpower your way out of it. Once your brain sees that fake original price and that ticking clock, the neurological math is already done, and the anxiety has already set in. If you want to protect your money, you have to completely blindfold yourself to the anchor before it ever appears on your screen. The system fix for this requires establishing a heavy wall of digital friction. First, you must ruthlessly unsubscribe from every single promotional email list and delete every retail app that sends push notifications to your phone. You simply cannot allow these corporations to beam custom-engineered anchors directly into your pockets while you are trying to live your life. Second, you implement an automated behavioral rule called the time-to-value conversion. Whenever you want to buy something, you completely ignore the retail price, the discount, and the fake original number. You take the final cost of the item and you divide it by your actual hourly wage. If the item costs you 3 entire days of your waking labor, you evaluate that brutal reality on its own. You replace their manipulative math with your own inescapable friction. Let us look at what happens in the immediate aftermath of a frictionless purchase. You click the buy button, the digital dopamine rushed through your system, and the transaction was completely invisible. But 2 days later, a cardboard box arrives on your porch. You carry it inside, cut it open, and pull out the item. Almost immediately, a strange, sinking feeling starts to creep into your stomach as you look at what you just bought. We have all experienced this exact moment. You look at the gadget, the shoes, or the kitchen appliance, and you immediately start talking out loud to an empty room. You start listing all the reasons why this was actually a very smart, very necessary investment. You tell yourself that this premium coffee maker will save you hundreds of dollars at the cafe, so it practically pays for itself. You are desperately trying to build a logical bridge to justify an emotional decision. This mental gymnastics routine is not a quirky personality trait. It is a well-documented biological response with a specific name in behavioral psychology. It is called cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is the intense, uncomfortable psychological tension you feel when your actions completely contradict your deeply held beliefs. Your core belief is that you are a smart, rational adult who cares about building long-term wealth and achieving financial freedom. But your recent action was an impulsive, frictionless purchase that actively destroyed a piece of that wealth. Your brain absolutely hates this contradiction. It perceives this internal conflict as a threat, and it creates a sensation that borders on physical discomfort. To resolve this pain, your brain does something incredibly deceptive. Researchers at Harvard Business School have studied this phenomenon extensively, often referring to it as post-purchase rationalization. They found that instead of simply admitting a financial mistake, the human brain will completely rewrite its own narrative and alter its preferences to make the impulsive purchase seem totally logical. The Harvard researchers noted that consumers will suddenly inflate the perceived value and necessity of an item only after they have already paid for it. If you ask a person how much they need a new smartwatch before they buy it, they might give it a low priority score. But ask them 10 minutes after the transaction is complete, and their brain will suddenly convince them that the watch is an absolute necessity for their health and productivity. This is exactly why the one-click digital economy is so dangerous. The massive retail corporations know that if they can just get you past that frictionless checkout screen, your own brain will do the heavy lifting of convincing you to keep the item. They rely on your biological cognitive dissonance to prevent you from packing the box back up and asking for a refund. You end up trapped in a cycle where you are essentially gaslighting your own bank account. Every single time you rationalize a bad purchase, you strengthen the neurological pathway that makes the next bad purchase even easier to justify. You are unconsciously training yourself to accept financial self-sabotage because it feels better in the short term than admitting you fell for a marketing trap. You cannot rely on willpower or discipline to fight cognitive dissonance because your brain is actively lying to you in real time to protect your ego. If you try to debate yourself in your head, the emotional side of your brain will win. You need a system that forces objective, cold reality back into the picture. You need an automated return mandate. Here is how this friction-based system works. For any non-consumable physical item you buy online, You immediately create a staging area. When the package arrives, you do not throw the cardboard box away. You do not cut off the price tags. You leave the item sitting right next to your front door, inside its original packaging, with the return receipt sitting right on top of it for exactly 1 full week. You create a heavy physical reminder of the transaction. After 7 days have passed, the initial dopamine rush is completely gone. The excitement has faded, and the cognitive dissonance has lost its grip. You are finally able to look at the item with a calm, rational brain. If you have not actively used the item or found absolute, undeniable value in it within that strict 1-week window, you do not think about it. You just pack it up and return it. You build a physical, undeniable system that catches your psychological mistakes before they drain your wealth permanently. Let us talk about the single most common piece of financial advice you will ever hear and why it is almost guaranteed to fail you. Everyone tells you that the secret to getting ahead is to sit down, make a strict budget, and track every single penny you spend. But a traditional budget is essentially just a spreadsheet filled with good intentions. It relies entirely on you making the correct, logical choice 50 times a day, every single day, for the rest of your life. Budgeting fails for the exact same reason that most diets fail. It requires a constant, unending supply of daily cognitive effort. You are forcing yourself to swim against a raging river of digital marketing and frictionless checkout systems. As long as the path of least resistance leads directly to spending, you will eventually get tired and let the current take you. We are biologically wired to take the path of least resistance to conserve energy. This is a survival mechanism. If spending money takes 1 second and 1 click, but saving money requires you to actively log into a bank portal, navigate to a transfer screen, and type in an amount, your brain will almost always choose the click. The default architecture of your financial life is currently set to extract wealth, not build it. Behavioral economists at Yale University have studied how system defaults completely dictate human behavior. They looked specifically at corporate retirement plans. When employees had to actively sign up for a retirement account, participation was incredibly low because it required effort. But when the company changed the system to automatically enroll people, participation skyrocketed. The people did not suddenly gain more willpower or discipline. The architecture around them simply changed. Right now, the architecture of your digital life has been built by massive retail corporations. When your paycheck hits your primary checking account, that account is likely hardwired directly to your digital wallet, your favorite rideshare apps, and your online retail accounts. You have essentially built a high-speed digital superhighway designed to move money away from you as fast as physically possible. Trying to budget in that environment is like standing on a superhighway and trying to stop speeding cars with your bare hands. Every time you try to say no to a purchase, you are fighting the entire structural design of your digital life. You are experiencing massive willpower depletion just trying to maintain the status quo. We have to stop relying on discipline and start reversing the architecture. To win this game, you must engineer a personal financial ecosystem that uses heavy, agonizing friction for your spending and absolute zero friction for your saving. You have to flip the default settings of your life. It starts with automating the extraction of your own wealth before the corporations can get their hands on it. The very first day your paycheck arrives, you set up an automated system that immediately sweeps your investment and savings money into entirely separate institutions. You do not wait until the end of the month to see what is left over, because nothing will be left over. You force the money to vanish before your brain can even register it, completely bypassing the mental accounting trap that convinces you to spend it. Once the savings are secured automatically, you must intentionally cripple your ability to spend whatever is left. You leave your spending money in a dedicated checking account, but you completely sever the digital ties that make it easy to access. You go into your phone settings and you delete your debit and credit cards from your digital wallet. You go into your web browser and you clear all the autofill data for your payment methods. If you want to buy something online, you must force yourself to stand up, walk into another room, find your physical wallet, pull out the plastic card, and type all 16 digits manually into the computer. You have to type the expiration date. You have to type the security code. You have to physically interact with the barrier you built for yourself. That physical walk across the room is the friction. The manual typing of those numbers is the friction. By building this architectural wall, you are buying your rational brain the precious time it needs to catch up with your emotional brain. You are no longer fighting the corporations with a spreadsheet. You are fighting them with a fortress of your own design. We have spent a lot of time talking about the day-to-day psychology of your spending. But now we have to zoom out and look at the terrifying mathematical reality of what happens when you let these systems run your life for decades. The greatest trick the digital economy ever pulled was convincing you that small, frictionless purchases have no macro impact on your overall wealth. We are programmed to only fear massive financial catastrophes, completely ignoring the invisible daily leaks that are actually sinking the ship. This brings us to a concept known in financial circles as the compound effect. Usually, when people talk about compounding, they are talking about investment growth. They talk about how money makes money. But what nobody tells you is that compounding works in both directions. When you lose money to algorithmic warfare and frictionless checkout systems, you are not just losing the face value of the item. You are losing the compounded future value of those dollars. Let us look at the trap of small numbers. Because of mental accounting, your brain dismisses a $15 subscription or a $30 late-night impulse buy as basically harmless. It feels like a drop in the ocean compared to your rent or your mortgage. Your ancient brain literally cannot comprehend compounding math because linear survival in the wilderness never required it. But the math does not care what your brain can comprehend. Let us run the exact numbers on what decision fatigue is actually costing you over the course of your life. Let us say you fall victim to the frictionless economy just 2 or 3 times a week. It could be an extra food delivery, a targeted social media ad you cave to, or a random digital sale. Let us conservatively estimate that this adds up to about $50 a week of completely unplanned, mindless spending. Over a single month, that is $200. Over a year, that is $2,400 vanishing into the digital ether. If you just looked at the raw cash, you might shrug it off. But we have to look at the opportunity cost of that capital. We have to look at what that money would have become if it had been protected by structural friction instead of exposed to digital extraction. If you had built the friction architecture we just talked about, that $200 a month would have survived the night. If that money was automatically routed into a standard index fund returning an average historical rate of 8% a year, the math becomes absolutely staggering. You are about to see exactly why these corporations fight so hard for your small daily transactions. Over 10 years, that mindless $50 a week costs you about $36,000 in lost wealth. Over 20 years, the cost balloons to $114,000. And if you let this frictionless leakage continue over a standard 30-year working career, those tiny, insignificant impulse buys will have robbed your future self of nearly $300,000. This is the compounding reality of an environment engineered to bypass your natural loss aversion. A $300,000 penalty for just $50 a week of friction-free spending. You are not just buying a piece of clothing or a gadget today. You are actively trading away the time, security, and freedom of your future self just to satisfy a temporary chemical craving manufactured by an algorithm. Look at the contrast between 2 completely different types of people trying to survive in this economy. Person A relies entirely on willpower. They try to be good. They fight the algorithms manually. They win some days, but they constantly leak capital because their biological battery always eventually drains. They reach retirement age exhausted, wondering why they never seem to get ahead despite working incredibly hard their entire lives. Person B takes a completely different path. Person B relies on architecture. They accept that their ancient brain is severely outmatched by billion-dollar supercomputers. They build heavy, agonizing friction walls around their spending and zero-friction highways for their investing. They never see that $200 a month, so their brain never misses it. They completely opt out of the willpower game. Person B ends up $300,000 richer without ever feeling restricted or deprived. They did not have more discipline than Person A. They did not have a better work ethic or a superior moral compass. They just stopped playing a rigged digital game and started letting the silent, invisible power of math work for them in the background. We have to completely change the way we look at the ultimate goal of money management. If you listen to traditional financial media, they will tell you that the end goal of personal finance is to build a massive pile of cash so you can eventually stop working. But that definition completely misses the emotional reality of what money actually represents. Money is not just a mathematical tool. Money is a physical representation of your stored time and your stored energy. Every single dollar in your bank account represents a fraction of your life that you traded away to earn it. When you let a frictionless digital checkout system steal $20 from you, you are not just losing a piece of paper. You are allowing a corporation to reach into your past and steal the actual hours of your life that you worked to get that money. That is the true cost of algorithmic warfare. It is a slow, invisible robbery of your time on this earth. And the worst part is that the very same people who built the trap are the ones selling you the guilt when you inevitably fall into it. They want you to believe that your financial struggles are a reflection of your character. They want you to think that if you just had a little more discipline, you would not be in this situation. But we know the truth now. You are not broken. You are not bad with money. Your brain is simply a biological machine that was never designed to navigate a world where resources can disappear into thin air without a physical trace. True financial peace does not come from beating yourself up for having biological limits. It comes from accepting those limits and building an architectural fortress around them. It comes from the profound realization that wealth is not a product of intense daily discipline. Wealth is a product of intelligent design. You do not get wealthy by trying to outsmart a billion-dollar supercomputer every single night when you are exhausted. You get wealthy by refusing to play their game entirely. When you delete your saved credit card information from your web browsers, you are going to feel a spike of annoyance. When you force yourself to wait 24 hours before emptying your digital shopping cart, you are going to feel a sense of frustration. Do not run from that feeling. That annoyance is the friction. That frustration is the exact biological shield that is protecting your life's labor from the machines designed to extract it. The most incredible part of this entire shift is what happens to the money you actually do decide to spend. When you rely on willpower, every single purchase feels layered with a hidden sense of guilt. You constantly wonder if you are making a mistake, because the transaction happened so fast that your rational brain never got a chance to sign off on it. You live in a state of constant, low-grade financial anxiety. But when you build heavy, agonizing friction into your digital life, everything changes. If you wait the full 24 hours, and you physically walk across the room, and you manually type in all 16 digits of your card, and you still want the item, you can buy it with absolute total peace. You know for a fact that the purchase was intentional. It survived your behavioral defenses. The guilt completely vanishes. You have replaced a life of constant, invisible anxiety with a life of deliberate, automated peace. You no longer have to fear your own impulses because your environment is designed to catch them before they can do any damage. You can finally stop playing defense against your own psychology and start using the incredible power of automation to build the future you actually want. Once you understand the invisible behavioral forces at play in the modern economy, you can never unsee them. You will look at every targeted ad, every flash sale, and every one-click checkout button for what it truly is: a trap designed for a hunter-gatherer brain. You are now awake to the reality of the system, and you finally have the tools to build a wall that the algorithms can never breach. If this resonated with you, drop a comment below. And if you want to understand the deeper psychology behind why we do what we do with our money, hit subscribe. This is Minecraft, where ideas become action, and action becomes your future.